In 1961, a submarine movie hit theaters and made audiences grip their armrests in terror, not because of monsters, but because of something far more chilling: the idea that Earth's atmosphere could literally catch fire and burn us all alive. Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea wasn't just another underwater adventure, it was paranoia sealed inside a steel tube, racing against a doomsday clock. Today, we're diving 20 weird facts deep into the film that launched Irwin Allen's empire and made millions of viewers wonder whether science could accidentally destroy the world. Number 1. The Seaview submarine became an icon of 60s sci-fi. Before we talk about what happened on screen, we need to talk about the star of the show. And it wasn't human. The FS-1 Seaview submarine became one of the most instantly recognizable vehicles in science fiction history. This wasn't some generic Navy sub painted silver. The Seaview had a personality, a design that screamed future in every rivet. That distinctive profile, sleek, powerful, vaguely alien, captured imagination so completely that the submarine itself became the franchise. Fox knew they had something special when fan mail started arriving addressed to the Seaview instead of the actors. The design was so successful that it launched an entire television series that ran for 4 seasons, making the Seaview more famous than most of the actors who ever walked its decks. Number 2. Allen shot real footage in dangerous seas. Director Irwin Allen had a reputation for being demanding, but what he asked his underwater crew to do on Voyage bordered on insane. Instead of using stock footage from the studio library, Allen insisted on filming brand new underwater sequences specifically for this movie. He wanted authenticity, control, and spectacle, so he sent divers out into the Pacific Ocean off the California coast with heavy 1961 camera equipment to capture real ocean environments. The currents were vicious. Several divers later admitted in interviews that the shoots were genuinely life-threatening, with rip currents pulling them off course and limited air supplies forcing them to surface in dangerous conditions. Allen got his footage, but the cost was nearly measured in human lives. Number 3. The dome windows were scientifically impossible. Let's talk about the Seaview's most iconic feature: that gorgeous panoramic glass nose that gave the crew stunning views of the ocean depths. It looked incredible on screen. There was just one tiny problem: it was physically impossible. Naval engineers who consulted on the film privately told 20th Century Fox executives that those massive dome windows would implode instantly under real deep-sea pressure. The glass would shatter like a wine glass hit with a hammer. The water pressure at the depths the Seaview supposedly operated would crush those windows in milliseconds, flooding the submarine and killing everyone aboard before they could even scream. But Allen didn't care. He wasn't making a documentary, he was making a spectacle. The dome stayed. Audiences were mesmerized by those sweeping underwater vistas framed by impossible glass, never knowing they were watching beautiful, lethal fiction. Number 4. Barbara Eden was cast in only 24 hours. Before she became Jeannie, Barbara Eden landed one of the fastest casting decisions in Fox history. Irwin Allen was flipping through headshots in his office, looking for someone to play Kathy Connors, the Admiral's secretary who provides the film's romantic subplot. He stopped on Eden's photo. Something about her look, that mix of girl-next-door charm and subtle sophistication, clicked instantly in his mind. Allen called her agent immediately. He offered her the role over the phone based purely on that photograph. Eden was hired within 24 hours of Allen first seeing her picture. She showed up to set, barely knowing what the film was about, was fitted for her costumes, and started shooting. Number 5. The Fireball Crisis was inspired by a real Cold War fear. Here's where Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea gets genuinely unsettling. The film's central crisis, the Van Allen radiation belt catching fire and threatening to incinerate Earth's atmosphere, wasn't just sci-fi nonsense pulled from thin air. It was based on an actual scientific debate from 1958. When the Van Allen belts were first discovered, some scientists genuinely worried about what would happen if nuclear testing or solar radiation destabilized them. Could they ignite? Could they trigger a runaway atmospheric chain reaction? The answer was almost certainly no, but in 1958, we didn't know for sure. That uncertainty terrified people. Irwin Allen read about this debate in the news and immediately recognized the dramatic potential. He took that kernel of real scientific anxiety and amplified it into full apocalyptic terror. Audiences in 1961 were living through the Cuban Missile Crisis, duck and cover drills, backyard bomb shelters. Number 6. The film was rushed to beat another submarine movie. Fox was in a race. Several other studios were developing submarine pictures in 1960, including The Silent Enemy and The Lost Continent, and Fox executives were paranoid about being beaten to theaters. So they put brutal pressure on the production team to finish Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea on an accelerated schedule. Post-production became a nightmare. Editors were working 16-hour days. Special effects teams were completing shots hours before they needed to be integrated into the final cut. The sound mixing was done in a fraction of the normal time. Irwin Allen was sleeping on a couch in his office, overseeing every department simultaneously. Terrified that any delay would let a competitor steal their thunder, crew members later described it as one of the most intense post-production pushes they'd ever experienced. Number 7. The nuclear launch sequence used real Navy procedures. When you watch the scenes where the Seaview crew prepares to fire a nuclear missile, pay close attention. Those aren't made-up Hollywood procedures, they're based on actual U.S. Navy protocols. The production hired technical advisors with Navy backgrounds who provided detailed information on how missile firing sequences worked on nuclear submarines. Obviously, they didn't share anything classified, but they gave the filmmakers enough authentic detail to make the scenes feel uncomfortably real. The two-man confirmation system, the specific language of the launch commands, the precise physical actions required, all of it was based on real submarine operations. Walter Pidgeon, playing Admiral Nelson, spent hours rehearsing these sequences so they'd sound natural and authoritative. Navy personnel who saw the film were reportedly impressed by how accurately it depicted the gravitas and procedure of a nuclear launch. In a movie full of impossible submarines and burning skies, the missile launch scenes were the most grimly realistic moments on screen. Number 8. Peter Lorre almost quit on day one. Peter Lorre, the legendary actor known for his unsettling performances in films like M and Casablanca, nearly walked off the Voyage set before filming even properly began. The problem was simple: claustrophobia. The Seaview interior sets were cramped, hot, and oppressive, exactly as you'd expect a real submarine to feel. But Lorre, who was also dealing with health problems at the time, found the environment unbearable. On the first day of shooting, he reportedly told crew members he couldn't do it, that the walls were closing in on him, that he needed out. Production halted. Irwin Allen, realizing he was about to lose one of his key actors, pulled Lorre aside for a private conversation. What Allen said remains mostly unknown, but it worked. Lorre stayed. Whether Allen appealed to his professionalism, offered him more breaks, or simply convinced him the role was worth the suffering, we don't know. What we do know is that Lorre powered through his discomfort and delivered a memorable performance as Commodore Lucius Emery. Number 9. The Seaview interior spanned 3 sound stages. One of the most impressive illusions in Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea is that the submarine feels like a single, unified space. When characters walk from the control room to the missile bay to the observation deck, it feels continuous and real. But here's the trick. The Seaview interior was actually scattered across 3 completely separate sound stages on the Fox lot. The control room was on one stage, the observation deck on another, and various corridors and compartments on a third. The designers were meticulous about making doorways, wall panels, and lighting match perfectly between sets so the editing could create the illusion of connected spaces. Actors would finish a scene on one stage, walk across the Fox lot, and continue the same scene on an entirely different set. The continuity. Supervisor's job was a nightmare, but on screen, the magic worked perfectly. Audiences had no idea they were watching a submarine that existed in 3 places simultaneously. Number 10. The miniature submarines were destroyed. This one hurts. The Seaview miniatures used for the spectacular underwater effects sequences were genuine works of art. These weren't crude models thrown together quickly. They were meticulously crafted replicas built by Fox's top model makers, featuring incredible detail and engineering. Some were several feet long, with working ballast tanks, articulated fins, and interior lighting. These models were used for shots of the Seaview gliding through underwater canyons, dodging icebergs, and surfacing dramatically. They cost a fortune to build. They took months to perfect. They were masterpieces of 1960s practical effects craftsmanship. And after production wrapped, Fox executives made a decision that would horrify modern collectors. They ordered the models destroyed. Storage space cost money, and Fox didn't see any reason to preserve props from a film they assumed would disappear after its theatrical run. Most of the miniature sea views were literally thrown in dumpsters. A few small pieces survived in private collections, but the main models, the heroes of those gorgeous underwater shots, are gone forever. Today, those models would be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars each. Instead, they're landfill. Number 11. The shark scene used a real shark. There's a scene in Voyage where divers from the sea view encounter a shark in open water. It was supposed to be a controlled sequence using a trained animal or possibly a mechanical effect. But during one underwater shoot, something unexpected happened. A wild shark swam into the filming area. The divers in the water were suddenly dealing with an actual, unpredictable predator. The footage was incredible. When the divers surfaced safely and the crew reviewed what they'd captured, they realized they had gold. That accidental encounter with a real shark made it into the final cut. Number 12. It featured more underwater effects than 20,000 Leagues. Fox's marketing department made a bold claim when promoting Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. This was the most ambitious underwater movie ever attempted. They specifically compared it to Disney's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea from 1954, which had been the gold standard for underwater spectacle. Fox claimed Voyage featured more underwater effects shots, more complex miniature work, and more actual ocean photography than Disney's film. The studio put their money where their mouth was, dedicating a massive portion of the budget to underwater sequences. When critics and audiences compared the two films, most agreed Fox wasn't bluffing. The scope and scale of Voyage's underwater world genuinely exceeded what Disney had achieved 7 years earlier. This wasn't just promotional hype. Fox had genuinely pushed underwater filmmaking. Technology forward. The studio understood that audiences in 1961 craved spectacle, and they delivered it in suffocating, beautiful detail. Number 13. The TV series. Irwin Allen never planned for Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea to become a television franchise. The movie was designed as a standalone theatrical experience. Tell the story, make some money, move on. But then something unexpected happened. The film became a genuine box office success, particularly in international markets. Audiences loved the sea view, loved the underwater adventure format, and wanted more. ABC executives noticed. They approached Allen about developing a television version that could capture that same audience weekly. Allen was initially skeptical. TV had smaller budgets, tighter schedules, less prestige, but ABC made him an offer with significant creative control, and Allen saw the potential. The Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea television series premiered in 1964, 3 years after the film, and ran for 110 episodes across 4 seasons. It became one of the defining sci-fi shows of the 1960s. None of that happens without the movie's surprise theatrical success. That film's unexpected earnings literally created a television empire. Number 14. Walter Pidgeon learned actual submarine commands. Walter Pidgeon took his role as Admiral Harriman Nelson seriously, perhaps more seriously than anyone expected. Instead of just memorizing his lines and delivering them with authority, Pidgeon spent weeks before filming studying actual U.S. Navy submarine command protocols. He wanted Nelson's orders to sound authentic to military audiences, not like Hollywood's idea of military dialogue. Pidgeon practiced the specific cadence, terminology, and tone that real submarine captains used. He studied naval procedure manuals. He even reached out to retired Navy officers to understand the psychology of commanding a vessel underwater, where every decision could mean life or death. The result is a performance that feels genuinely authoritative. When Pidgeon barks an order on the sea view, it doesn't sound like an actor playing a captain. It sounds like a captain commanding a ship. Navy personnel who saw the film frequently commented on how realistic Pidgeon's performance felt. High praise considering how easily Hollywood usually butchers military authenticity. Number 15. Several scenes were reshot. Test screenings are brutal, honest, and occasionally devastating. When Fox showed an early cut of Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea to test audiences, several dramatic scenes that were supposed to be tense and terrifying got laughs instead. Audiences found them unintentionally funny, undercutting the film's apocalyptic stakes. This was a disaster. If your doomsday movie is making people giggle, you're in trouble. Irwin Allen and the writers had to figure out what wasn't working. Sometimes the dialogue was too melodramatic. Sometimes the performances were too broad. Sometimes the emotional beats just didn't land properly. They identified the problem scenes, rewrote them, and brought actors back for expensive reshoots. These weren't minor tweaks. Entire sequences were reconceptualized and refilmed. The budget ballooned, the schedule extended, but the reshoots worked. The final cut of Voyage played dramatically, with audiences engaged and tense rather than amused. Those test screening laughs taught Alan valuable lessons about tone that he'd carry through his entire career. Number 16. The iceberg collision used 100% practical effects. There's a spectacular sequence where the Seaview collides with a massive iceberg, and it's pure 1961 practical effects magic. No optical effects. No clever editing tricks to hide limitations. Just real physical materials captured on camera. The effects team built an enormous iceberg model from wax, foam, and actual crushed ice. It was huge, several stories tall, and designed to break apart convincingly on impact. The miniature Seaview was rigged on cables and physically crashed into this iceberg in a giant water tank. Cameras captured the collision at high speed, so when played back at normal speed, the impact looked massive and powerful. The iceberg model shattered beautifully, sending chunks of wax ice exploding through the water in slow motion. The physics weren't faked. They were real materials obeying real physical laws. Modern audiences raised on CGI often can't tell the difference, but there's a weight and texture to these practical effects that digital effects struggle to replicate. The iceberg collision remains one of the film's most impressive sequences precisely because it's 100% real. Number 17. Fox wanted a giant monster. Irwin Allen refused. Here's where Irwin Allen showed genuine artistic integrity. Fox executives, watching the success of giant monster movies in the late 1950s, wanted Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea to include a creature fight. They pushed Allen hard. Give us a giant squid or a sea serpent or some underwater monstrosity for the Seaview to battle. Test the model waters for franchise potential. Allen refused. He argued that the film's tension came from the ticking clock of Earth's burning atmosphere, from human conflict and scientific crisis. Adding a monster would undercut those stakes, turning the film into just another creature feature. The enemy wasn't a beast. It was time, doubt, and the terrifying possibility that science itself had doomed humanity. Allen won the argument, but it cost him political capital at Fox. The executives thought he was making a mistake, leaving spectacle on the table. But Allen understood something crucial. The film's power came from making audiences afraid of invisible threats, radiation, fire, atmospheric collapse, not rubber monsters. That restraint elevated Voyage above typical 1960s sci-fi schlock. Number 18. The film was shot in ultrascope to compete with Disney. Fox was obsessed with beating Disney at the underwater spectacle game, and they knew they needed a technical edge. Disney's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea had been shot in standard widescreen CinemaScope, which looked gorgeous but was becoming standard by 1961. Fox needed something more impressive. They decided to shoot the movie in ultrascope, a widescreen format that was even more expansive than CinemaScope, giving them massive underwater vistas that could overwhelm audiences. The results were spectacular. Those sweeping shots of the Seaview gliding through ocean trenches, the panoramic views through the dome windows, the massive scale of the underwater environments, all of it was amplified by Ultrascope's ultra-wide frame. Fox's gamble paid off. Critics specifically mentioned the film's visual scope as one of its greatest strengths. The technical format became part of the spectacle. Number 19. The Navy quietly endorsed the movie. This was never officially announced, and Fox never explicitly marketed it. But the U.S. Navy quietly gave Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea its approval. Several naval consultants reviewed the script during pre-production, checking technical details for accuracy. While they obviously couldn't endorse the science fiction elements, the Navy wasn't about to vouch for burning radiation belts. They appreciated that the film treated submarine operations with respect and reasonable accuracy. Some Navy personnel even visited the set during filming to observe the production. Why did the Navy care? Because submarine warfare was a crucial component of Cold War strategy, and films that made submarines look exciting and sophisticated helped with recruitment and public perception. The Navy understood that Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, despite its sci-fi premise, was making submarine duty look heroic and vital. That was valuable propaganda, so they quietly helped where they could, offering technical advice and tacit approval. The relationship remained unofficial, but it was real. Number 20. The unique Seaview nose was based on a manta ray skeleton. Let's end where we began, with the Seaview's iconic design. That distinctive nose, the feature that made the submarine instantly recognizable, came from an unexpected inspiration: manta ray anatomy. Irwin Allen told his design team he wanted the Seaview to look alive, like it belonged in the ocean rather than being imposed upon it. The designers studied various sea creatures, looking for organic shapes that could be translated into steel and glass. They landed on manta rays, specifically the graceful curve of a manta ray's skeletal structure, the broad, flat profile, the wing-like extensions, the predatory elegance. They adapted those curves into the Seaview's bow, creating a submarine that looked both futuristic and primally ancient. It was a brilliant design choice. The Seaview didn't look like a machine pretending to be a fish. It looked like something that evolved to rule the depths. Something powerful and strange and beautiful. Voyage to the bottom of the sea took Cold War anxiety, trapped it in a steel tube, and gave audiences a front-row seat to apocalypse. If you enjoyed diving into these forgotten facts, hit that like button and subscribe for more retro cinema deep dives. The ocean of weird film history is bottomless, and we're just getting started.